Hey, Corona TV viewers, this is Peter Keys from Leonard Skinner. I want to wish you all a happy birthday.
First of all, let's just do the elbow bump because we can't do the handshake right now.
Hello, everybody on Corona TV. This is Macy Gray at Joffy Juice. Just hit me up.
You're smiling, and I saw your beautiful daughter earlier who I said could come on the show anytime. Welcome to the Sing.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. Great to be with you.
I'm actually laughing so much as the introduction's going for two reasons. One, because I'm still dealing with this weird little lag that seems to come and go, and I'm still not quite sure why it's happening. But also because Mitch Joel's in the background, and he's laughing at me, laughing at him, laughing at me. It's quite funny, and he's like, I know that person, Peter Keys, what the hell? That's just for you. That's just for you, Mitch. So welcome to the show, everybody. It is someday, I think it's someday. Happy someday, everybody. And Bob Farnham is here, excited for Corona TV, hashtag, and not again with the lag. It seems to come right at the beginning, Bob, so we'll figure out what's going on. I'm not quite sure yet, but we will figure it out. So I hope you guys are well, and I'm not going to waste too much of your time with stuff because I've got Mitch here, and my brother from another mother, as I've often called him and will continue to call him. Thought I would do some news today because there's stuff going on. Another 4.4 million unemployed. I mean, sometimes we just got to like recognize what's going on here. Another 4.4 million US workers have now applied for unemployment. And as a self-employed guy, I'm not even part of that whole mix. Also, 21% of people that were tested for antibodies in New York City had them. 21%, 1 in 5 people that were actually tested. These are not people that actually had the coronavirus. So isn't that interesting that 1 in 5 in this initial test are actually kind of realizing that they were infected and had absolutely no idea? From the sublime to the ridiculous, it seems like cats and dogs. It sounds like a Ghostbusters, like a Peter Venkman line. Cats and dogs living together. But some big cats in the zoo, in the Bronx Zoo, have tested lions and tigers, I kid you not, for COVID-19 after apparently the zookeeper accidentally infected them. I'm not really sure how that happens. And on the sporting front, La Liga's clubs have now, according to a source, been told that they will be playing behind closed doors until 2021. So what that means is the rest of this season, assuming there even is a season, and then next season, the start of the season, because the season begins in September. So crazy things, really crazy things going on at the moment. Welcome to another show where I get to welcome Mitch Joel, and we will talk to him in just a moment. I'll just quickly move through our happy birthdays for the day. Scott Stratton, I've actually didn't really know him very well until this whole Corona thing hit. He's been streaming every day. He's one of the granddaddies of the whole speaking scene. So happy birthday, Scott, to Bill, Nicole, Tina, Laura Reese, Andrea, Michael, Lazaro, Sherry, Natalie, Julian, Carolina, Jean, Rose, and Larry Eveling. Happy birthday, guys. Remember, you will never, ever celebrate alone as long as I am here and as long as we are together forever, forever, forever. Let's look at the numbers because, you know, as I was saying earlier to you guys, the numbers are interesting, right? When we're learning so much more about how this virus is infecting and affecting us physically, mentally, spiritually, on so many levels. We're approaching 50,000 deaths in the US, and I think we'll hit that number, unfortunately, most likely at some point tomorrow before the weekend. Mitch will be on soon, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about or some reflections as a Canadian as well. And a huge influx, I think, in terms of total tested, up to almost 5 million now in the US. And of course, we recognize that we need to be thinking long and hard about the US as the biggest problem right now in the space. So I think that, that's probably all the preamble that you want from me. I will say one thing very quickly before I do bring on Mitch, which is, oh, wait, we got a comment from Mitch himself. Well, this is very meta right now. Mitch says he has 2 screens so he can be here and backstage. Well, I don't even know what that means anymore. But yeah, okay, good. So he's watching me, watching him, watching me, watching. Again, it's very meta as well. James Fryman just said, let's get Peter Shankman back on the show. Trust me, once you're done with Mitch Joel, once you go Joel, you're never going back, buddy. It's about as simple as that. So you'll see how awesome he is as well. And looks like, I don't know, looks like Sarah's having a conversation with Bob. Well, why don't you guys get a room or just have a conversation? That's fine too. I do want to just mention one thing very quickly, which is that this has been an evolution for me. And it's a live case study for me in the sense that CoronaTV is something that I know I will continue after hopefully this coronavirus is a thing of the past. It will become known as Jaffe Juice TV, which is actually something I did before. And going back to that, I love this medium and I'm learning so much. And one of the things, I remember even back in the day, I talk about Mitch actually a lot, and Mitch and I together and across the sound and the beginning of 6 Pixels, maybe we'll pick it up in a moment. But I've always said you've got to find your authentic voice on each platform and in each medium. It's the same person, but the voice changes. The tonality can change. Sometimes you might be a little bit more serious. Sometimes you might be a little bit more business focused or less business focused, but it changes. And one of the things that's always been really, really hard with video is the difficulty level, the production quality. Mitch was joking with me earlier, basically talking about CoronaTV, and he said, well, besides the terrible scripting and copywriting and production quality, it's great. And I'm like, well, that's because there's no script and I am the production quality or the production value. But the ease of use to be able to set up and then the ability to edit post, that was always one of the most difficult aspects of dealing with video. And anyone who's created video would know that 3 minutes of video, to get to 3 quality minutes of video, you almost need to shoot about 30 for the most part. The editing is so painful and so time consuming. And it's so difficult when you're an entrepreneur. But this, of course, is a very different experience, this idea of actually having a show and being able to create something that looks like that. But anyway, enough about production quality. Let's talk about a different kind of production quality. Let's talk about Mitch Joel. Mitch is the founder of the 6 Pixels group. And he's the author of 2 books, 6 Pixels of Separation and Control Alt Delete. I have copies of both of those books, but I wish I could have a little bobblehead doll of Mitch, because that would make me really happy. Mitch, you're my bobblehead doll today. Just nod up and down if you agree.
Hi, Joe. So good to be here, straight off the Funko factory line.
Welcome to the show, Mitch Joel. How are you?
I'm here. I'm sequestered in my home office / study / reading room / room that I actually love. And yeah, I got time. I got some time to hang out. So I'm open. Schedule's good.
I want to explore the room. So we're going to just look around. First of all, I see 5 roses. Is that 5 roses tea?
No, it's I really love those 2 pillows. They're actually by the same company, a local company here in Montreal, and it's about Montreal culture. So we have a massive 5 roses neon sign from their factory. I believe it's Flower, that sort of flashes on and off. It's iconic in the Montreal skyline. And then the Rue Barré, which is sort of your road is blocked, is just because we have tremendous, we're going through our big dig here. And so I actually never had anything on those seats, but somebody said, it looks weird when you have an empty seat back there. Put pillows on it or something. I was like, I happen to have 2 pillows here they're sort of like Montreal locals. So that's the pillow.
Well, it also comes from the fact that I was watching a friend of yours, which you were just telling me before, Mark Bowden.
Yeah, Mark.
And he created a series of these. I'm going to try and get him on the show. He's created a series of these videos about what we can learn from the Dutch masters and the German, I don't know, surrealists or impressionists about what your background looks like. And now suddenly I'm realizing everything is calculated. Like at one point I was like, let me put the light on there and maybe I should move a bit over and
yeah.
Things. And I've got a weird light here as well. It's all because of him.
Well, Mark is a body language expert. He's also really good at sort of helping people communicate better. And so as this whole thing unfolded, I think he was realizing he was getting enough of people in their sort of basement with their half-broken IKEA bookshelf and like bags on the floor. And he was like, look, like your room can create part of the environment, which again, people like you and I who've created video have thought about things like lighting and quality and looking directly in the camera, not above, not below. And then he sort of pushed it further by talking about, pop culture. So you get those nostrils flaring. He's a great guy. His book, he's got a couple books on body language. He's been on my show countless times. Just brilliant about comms, body language, positioning. And now I sort of texted him yesterday. I said, I like this new side hustle of helping speakers be the interior designer for speakers' Facebook Lives. So he was sort of laughing about that.
He can call himself an interior speaker designer.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like interior design for professional speakers trying to look impressive on Facebook Live. Like that's basically, yeah.
Well, part of my journey now, in a way, and this from me, which is like there's something I liked. I've always been irreverent and self-deprecating at the best and worst of times, and so I like learning, and I like making mistakes, and I like going through this evolutionary process. But I tell you, like even at the beginning, I had my laptop, and I'm still doing this through a laptop. I'll come back to my Logitech in a second, but I had my laptop below me, and so people were looking up my nose.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And I didn't realize it. And how could I make such a rookie mistake? But I did. So
yeah, so I had a similar sort of experience, which is I have this other office that I go to with one of my ex-business partners, who's still my business partner. And it's about 1,000 square feet. And we've got like a cool little lounge area. It's small, but there's like office area. We have like a little, I call it a boardroom, but I record my podcast in there. And it's actually really well lit, really good for recording video. So I can have multiple situations sort of at the desk, more casual in the sort of boardroom type of thing. We have nice art books and stuff like that. So it's very visual. And then I came to work from home, obviously we shut the office down, and I had to bring some of that gear because I thought I'd be recording. So I brought it all here, plug it all in, and now some of my physical keynotes have transferred to virtual environments. And so I sort of got all this other gear and other stuff that I bought, and then I plugged it all in for my first one and set it up. And it took me, I'm not joking, like 3 hours. Get the camera right this, you don't want the ceiling in there, you want eye level. And I mean, there's pictures of it on Instagram that I posted or Facebook of like how crazy complex it was. And it was amazing to me that like you plug it all in and you just realize how most of it isn't right. Just like the cable wasn't the right cable, it's the wrong mic. Like I have this mic thing that I'm using now, which isn't my headset that I use to record my podcast. And if I you can sort of see it like here. So, it's got to be off, but now it's probably too far. And because of that, it's just all this stuff that I thought was so great. Like, oh, I'll have this amazing radio mic stand, which in theory I should be talking like this, which would sound a billion times, but you can't do that for video. It doesn't make sense. Right? So it's been a really interesting journey for me too, because my pedigree, as you know, is long form audio and writing. So this whole people asking me to do video, me doing video, me being forced to do video is I'm not loving it, to be honest. And all of this gear was the manifestation of it, was my realization that I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to do what you're doing. So happy to be a guest for you, but I don't want to be the host. I want to stick to what I love, which is writing and audio.
Although I mean, I suppose I'm wearing a dark T-shirt as well, but I'm trying to like be more like Mitch. But you're looking very nefarious right now.
I'll open the collar up. Is that better? Should I get a hairless cat? Would that help?
You expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond.
I expect you to die.
Okay, so two things about audio and video. First of all, this is the first time you and I are ever doing this way, which is kind of weird.
Are you sure that we've never done? No. Well, first of all,
I don't think so.
I have a great story about you and I doing video. My story, where my brain immediately went, was Mexico City. Do you remember do you know what I'm talking about? That time we went to Mexico City. So I was in Mexico City speaking for the IAB, and their big idea was to bring you, and I think it was Chris Brogan, in by video live.
I Skyped in, right?
This was years ago. Like this could be like 10 years ago. Yeah, so we've done video before in way worse scenarios than this, because like me being live on stage keynoting with having videos of my friends there who are making jokes, it was great. But so I think we have done stuff like this, and I guess it wasn't video, but we've done the Beamcast together a couple of times, which sort of feels like this, only there's cameras on. So
exactly, and we got a few comments. Brent Stein from or Stein, as they would say in South Africa, said he's calling me by my biblical name. Hi, Yosef. And I guess this would be my brother who's saying classic. He's either saying classic to the line from James Bond, or to the fact that Mitch Joel is a classic. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I haven't met Alan. I'm going to go Bond.
And look, remember Robert Brill? He said, I remember listening to your podcast from 2007.
Now, Robert, do you mean mine or Across the Sound, or both? What do you mean? Because you have to sort of.
Could you be more specific? So
when did you stop doing the podcast regularly?
So I don't know, but what I do,
you know.
You know what? Alan said both. So there you go, Mitch.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
Your
reputation, man, Charlie Brown,
precedes you. Your reputation precedes you. By the way, Mitch and I have. I would just like to show you our entire show notes. Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Well, let me hijack your show, because you do that to me all the time. So I'm going to hijack for 2 seconds and tell a story. I'm going to go back to around 2005, 6-ish, and podcasting just starts. And I'd been blogging quite ferociously at that point. And there was Seth Godin for sure. And there was Joseph Jaffe. In terms of my pantheons of like, these people are writing the things that I'm thinking. These people are writing the things I want to write. And I contemplated this idea of podcasting really early on. Like, again, I'd say 2004, 2005. And I remember like following podcasts. So there was Joe's, there was Terry Follis and David Jones, which was Inside PR. And then there was Shell and Neville doing, I can't remember the name of it now.
For immediate release.
For immediate release, thank you. And I used to call it the Holy Trinity. Like there's just nothing, like there is no room for me to do a podcast. And this is, again, we're going back many, many years. I remember going to podcasters across, PodCamp with Chris Penn and Chris Brogan. And I drove down with Julian Smith and Hugh McGuire, still super close friends of mine. And I remember going to PodCamp in Boston thinking, there's so many people doing this. Like, what am I thinking? And it is funny to watch the decades literally strip away. I think I'm the only idiot still doing it. I haven't missed an episode or a Sunday. So I think for immediate release still is. I think Inside PR does too, but it's not the same hosts. I don't know. And Joe gave up.
Robert said his 3 back then were Jaffe Juice, Across the Sound. Do I get 2 points for that? And for immediate release.
So originally when I started, I'm going to continue interrupting you. Immediately when I started the show, I actually didn't start my show. I don't know if you remember this, Joe, but I actually reached out to you and said, why don't you let me co-host Across the Sound? And your podcast was so big, you were like, I don't need this guy. Forget that. No way. And so my running joke was that whenever I had you on my show, I would call it Across the Sound 2.1, 2, 3, whatever the episode was. Almost as a victory lap, like I got you to co-host with me eventually.
So hold on. I'm glad you told that story, because if you didn't, I was going to tell the story. But this is my recollection of it, and you know what? I think we both may be right, because it all results in the same place. What happened was Steve Rubell started Across the Sound with me.
Right. Oh no, that you're right. Okay, I do remember that. Yeah.
And so we did 13 episodes, and it was actually proven at that point that most podcasts never got beyond 13. And I remember actually, you don't even, I mean, this is just a little minor part of it, but I've never even told you this. I remember being in San Diego, I think it was at an iMedia conference, and I was in my hotel room and we recorded it because we wanted to be religious about it. And I remember right at the end, the whole damn thing crashed. How many times did that happen to one of us? And I was distraught. An hour and a half, all the content, it was gone. It was so hard to do then, and it was so painful. And Steve at the time had one of the juiciest, hottest
blogs. He was so well respected. Yeah.
And he just, he came to me and look, the nicest guy. And he said, look, Joe, I'm not getting much out of this podcast. Like my blog has all this juice and influence, and I'm going to focus on that. So what I did was I did what a lot of, I guess television hosts might have done when they were going through a transition. And I had a different co-host every week.
Right. Yeah.
And it was awesome because it is awesome between us. And you said to me, would you like to do this like regularly, like become a permanent co-host? And I said to you, no.
Right. You're right.
And I said, why? And I said, go do it yourself.
Yeah. And I took that as a bit of an insult. I remember, so I have two really fun stories about that time. One is totally correct, and thank you, because it's like sparks that whole thing, which is I was like a guest host, and my whole thing was like, how do I keep being the guest host? How do I keep showing Joseph that I want to be on the show and that I want to do stuff and then eventually I said, look, I've been, thinking about my own show, but I think it would be better if it's just me. I just listened to every other episode. You're like, I really like this idea of like having different people. I'm like, no, you don't. You need me on. I goes, ego. And so, yeah, there was definitely go do your own show. And in my brain, I was like, look, if this doesn't work, I will have to definitely start my own show because I enjoyed the format. My Steve story came a couple of years later, which I don't think I've ever told this story. Is it negative? It's kind of negative, but it's fine because I like him a lot. He was speaking in Montreal at some event, and I went to meet him, and we'd met maybe a couple of times, but knew each other online. And I think I had just signed my book deal with Hachette and all that. It was a big literary agent. It was like a really big deal for me. And I remember like our agency had sent out a press release to bloggers, like signed, And I went to go see him. We were just hanging out, and he's like, "Oh, I got your press release, and you're writing a book." I said, "Yeah, for sure." I go, "Hey, Steve, like, why don't you write? You should really write a book. I mean, his content was so great." And he's like, "I'm not going to write a book." He goes, "There are too many books on this topic, anyways." And it was like it totally deflated me because I'm like, "Well, here I am. I just signed a deal. Like, I can't wait to write my book." And I forget who I told. I told someone the story. He didn't mean it maliciously. He just sort of was stating how he feels. And this very wise person, it wasn't you, Joe, it was someone else. They said something to me like, you're not trying to write an original book. That's like, there's no such thing. Like, you're trying to write a book about a certain thing from your perspective. And your perspective is really good and it really matters and people want to hear it. And I was like, damn, I wish I had heard that before because it would have been good information for me, but I wish I could have said that to Steve. Which is, Steve, what are you talking about? Like, the world needs your perspective in that book because I'd love to read that book too. But I always remembered that as being like one of those things where it was almost like I don't think he was taking a shot at me, but it sort of felt that way. Like, oh, everyone writes a book, big deal, I was like, ooh. But that became a lucid memory very quickly. Thanks, Joe, for bringing that back up.
But again, we spoke about authentic voice earlier, and a lot of people come to me. I mean, I've had the real pleasure, privilege, honor of being able to write 5 books now, and the thing is, I always tell people like people say, how many have you sold? And I'm like, I don't write. I would love to. I'm not going to lie. I would love to write a book that sells 1 million, 100 million copies, but that's not the book that I write. I write a book for myself. I write it for people. I write it for a handful of people in a way, which is probably a handful. I don't mean literally a handful, but it's not, I pull everything out. I almost feel like, I remember when someone said, writing a book is like giving birth. Of course, we wouldn't know. But it is so painful that immediately after birthing it, you say, I will never, ever write another book again because of this painful process. And of course, as you know, the process only really begins when you actually hand in the manuscript. But at the end of the day, for me, writing books, and I know why I'm writing, and because of that, it kind of steers me down the right path in a sense. It's not about what other people think of.
Yeah, I think people always want to sell more books. It's normal. I could have sold more books. Everyone, it's the way of the world. The way that I've self-justified it, whether it's right or wrong, is I think there are two types of business books. There are business books that are of the moment, and then there are business books that are more perennial, sort of read them at any time. And I really think that unless you hit like a real rocket ship on an of the moment book, which is so rare, like I'm even trying to think of what that might be, and I can't off the top of my head, versus the perennial books, the sort of ones that are just like the sort of Tom Peters type books that just sort of go on and on because the content has nothing to do with the moment. It's a good theory. Or I think Seth Godin's a great example of someone who writes perennial books. So that's part of it too, is I know that if I were to self-reflect on the two books that I've written, they're books that are written of the moment for sure. I mean, I look back on both of them very recently for a potential project I was thinking about, and I was surprised to see like how much of the philosophical truths were still very real. And obviously they're really interesting if you consider that there was no video or there was no whatever, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it might be. So it is a mix of both, but I'm hesitant to recommend my books to people these days. I'm like, I just think that people have covered that topic in the now, just more in a more fresh perspective with a newer reality. So when I think about my third book, which I'm nowhere in terms of anywhere, I do wish it to be more perennial, but I might write a book of the moment. I have no idea. I don't know. But you've been like that too. You very much have written books of the moment.
I'm just laughing. I'm laughing because this is a video show and we're talking about writing books and podcasting, which is so awesome. So like,
well, I think we're having conversations about the stuff that you and I have conversations about, which makes the show real. So that's more of my spin on it.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. I mean, one is, first of all, I've got to tell you, just I'm going to break for a second and believe it or not. I don't know if you can see this, but this is there you can see it. Can you see there?
Oh, the Bianca. Hi, Bianca. Nice.
I was just thinking of Bianca, and Bianca's on LinkedIn, and she said, "Hi, Joseph. Hi, Mitch. It's so great to see you again. Now only Chris Brogan is missing."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure he's available if you text him. Yeah.
I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get him. Like ever since he shaved, he looks like a little boy.
We'll send him a note. I'm sure he'd be happy to do it.
But first of all, two things. One is I think when you take a book like Control Alt Delete, it may have been of the moment, but the idea, the message, is as timeless and classic and universal as you could ever want. And I'll tell you a little personal anecdote. I'm working with a company, and you'll be one of the first people that I share this with very soon, Mitch. But it's a company that essentially is taking books and creating little training programs out of them. So the book almost becomes the backdrop. It almost becomes, oh, by the way, you can refer to this module is on, chapters 3 and 4 or pages 11 to 27. And what I've done, and it took a long time, I had to create about 35 video vignettes of these modules, which I've just finished. But I got the ability, the pleasure of going back to Flip the Funnel 10 years after I wrote this book, and going through the whole book again and experiencing it. But the final chapter was called Flip the Funnel for Your Personal Life. And I get goosebumps. I just got goosebumps now thinking about this idea of taking control of your life, and why, if you're miserable in a job, you want to be. And I'm thinking of now this 10 years later, COVID-19, and part of, when I'd referenced Seth Godin, who said, turn the funnel into a megaphone. But in that final chapter, I said, why don't you take the funnel and turn it into a spyglass or telescope to gain perspective? And it's just funny how, like, you write these things, and I know for me, I never ever want to write a book that's just a fad or flavor of the day, whether it's joining the conversation, which still companies struggle to do.
Yeah.
Or go to stuff, or flip the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, look, fundamentally, you're right. When I see the book on the seat of a convention center, which I haven't seen in a while, and people are picking it up, I'm not like, oh my God, there's so much missing from there. Not at all. And I think, if anything, what I said earlier is still true, which is when I read through it, I'm really proud of how right it was. I think that the path that social media took in terms of becoming primarily a paid media and a platform for politics and whatever has happened is this sort of sad derivative of what we were ultimately saying. And what we were ultimately saying was also based off of the shoulder of giants before us, like Blue Train Manifesto and things like that. So it's true. I mean, there's a truism in that. And I still use the lines that, like, it's an amazing world we live in when anything you want to create in text, images, audio, and video, you can do for free and broadcast it to the world, which is what we're doing right now. It's amazing. I think the challenge with it is how it was weaponized to a certain degree, and how it was transformed into a world where I think you and I had hoped that it would be, let 1,000 flowers blossom, but it became almost worse than the world of three networks, and only because it is a Google and Facebook and to a certain degree Amazon world. And I don't think that that's good. I don't think it's good for anybody in terms of getting your ideas out. And I just don't like the way the technology slanted it in terms of what gets heat and what doesn't. So it's stuff like that I feel I got very wrong. And to a certain degree, it's hard in a sort of Andrew Keen world, where Andrew and I've debated on stage and in my podcast, many times.
Yeah.
And I feel like I should have been more open-minded versus standing on my platform, because it's a little bit of both, and a lot of both, actually.
So is Andrew Keen right now? I've got to reach out to Andrew Keen as well. Is he right now watching us going, nah, or is he like?
Well, he was doing that even when we were still cheering. So I don't think anything's changed, and I don't think the result of being right is necessarily an outcome that we want, including him, because ultimately the platform he uses to connect is the same ones we're using right now.
I feel like I wish he could just like come into this conversation. We could chat to him, because I've also had the ability to spend time with him and talk to him. And I'm thinking in my mind, I wonder if he was right for the wrong reasons or if he was wrong for the right reasons. It's like, I'm not sure which one it is, but I think that, he was almost a curmudgeon. And I think of like Bob Hoffman, who's like kind of like my nemesis, my friendly nemesis, on the Beamcast. But he was almost just attacking. He was just taking one perspective. He was taking that bottom of the barrel. Turns out that there was a lot of nefarious things that I don't even think he could have thought of.
Sure.
But I always had the promise. I think of Twitter. I still think of the ultimate, consummate customer service panacea and platform. Still to this day, still companies not using it, but of course Twitter has become something completely different. Here's another one, Mitch: anonymity. That was always the gift. It was the gift to allow someone, the man in the street, the woman in the street, the downtrodden, the Joe average, to be able to take on, the David to take on the Goliath and play Goliath. But of course, that became fake news and Russian trolls and.
Well, it's deeper than that. I think when I really think of the state of things, I think about like the interactions that I have with my kids or my nieces and nephews, and it frustrates me. And this is where it's like a get off my lawn maybe moment for me, which is fine, when they talk about things like, I just want to look at a screen. Like there's nothing in particular. Like we would be like, I want to watch Star Trek, or I want to go see Star Wars. So then it's just like, I just want a screen. Because like a game, a YouTube video, a show on Netflix, it's just video, which is something I spoke about. Like, what is a movie? I spoke about that. I wrote about that like 15 years ago. So that frustrates me, that it's more about the screen than the content. That just is something that always sort of, and when we talk about, they're young, and so they'll talk about things like they want to do a YouTube channel, and they want it not because they have something to say, but because they see this sort of numbers and the fame, how many subscribers, how many viewers. And I'm like, like when did I ever create anything in my life? And I've had quite an interesting media-based life where the strategy was just you wrote things of interest, you chased stories of interest. And when I look at the platforms now, a lot of it is about that drug of chasing the numbers. I'm not saying that traditional networks don't do that or haven't done that, but as an independent content creator, I think that's why I still do my show. It's why I still do the 6 Pixels every weekend. It's because I don't want that like NPR break to radio. Like I want to have long form. I want to break the rules a little bit, and I want to have the conversations that I think the world needs. But I'm not. It's that chasing of numbers that's always really dangerous to me, and it's so pervasive in the content creators today, blue check marks and things like that. That it's I don't know. It does. I feel like an old man. It bothers me. It fundamentally bothers me.
There's so much you're talking about right now, and I'm trying to think like which one do I want to kind of like attack first? Not attack the idea, but like get into. The first thing is
we've been known to attack each other anyway, so it's fine.
I know, but the first thing is I think about I have this backwards and forwards now with my kids. You know, like being in quarantine. Looking at some of these TikTokers and I just like, and this one was on Jimmy Fallon and this one's got 58 million followers. I'm like, but you know, they're a high school student. They're not talented. They're like, what do you mean? Look at how they dance and look at how they lip sync. And I'm like, but they're not talented. Like, but you know, I realize that yes, they are talented, I guess, in their own right and in their own medium and own channel and at their own time. And that's my kind of like curmudgeon-y, how I see where I've grown, not always up, but sometimes down. That's the one thing. And then the other thing that you said that I wanted to add is there's something to be said for you know, going back to like, it's been a common theme, which is longing for a return to real journalism and professional content creators. I've been talking about how during this quarantine time, we should be actually buying the newspaper. We should be looking at the news in the morning and the evening, or we should be, you know, Steve Garfield, who I think is watching at the moment because he just posted something on Andrew Keane.
Yeah.
He took a photo of all the obituaries in the Boston Globe, and it was just breathtaking and so emotional to see the faces of the people that have departed, that have passed away, and see 8 pages of print dedicated to them and their lives. And it's just, you realize it's so weird. What's old is new again, how we come full circle. Both of these forces that are coming together now, and we're in the middle, and we see it, we recognize it, we're a part of it, and yet we're also having conflict with it too.
But yeah, and to a certain degree, I think that the tables have turned and that people have to pay for quality journalism, whether it's things like The Economist or name your tune in terms of newspapers, that they're giving free stuff, but a lot of it is now the recognition, whatever the price may be, that there's value in that content. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big proponent in it. And you're right that my disposition now has shifted. And I think even for younger people now, there is an understanding of what we think of paywall. I don't think they think of paywall. I think it's like some of this content is free and some of it isn't. I mean, most of them have gaming platforms that they pay to access, whether it's an Xbox Live or you know, whatever the platform might be. So I do think that tide has turned. That's sort of like free to like monetization. I don't know if that's so much the argument anymore. I'm not sure. But you're right that now more than ever, when I think about the voices that I like or the newsletters that I like, even if they are free and they're asking, I'm happy to pay or support by whether it's buying their book or paying a premium to get it a week earlier. I mean, stuff I don't really care about, but I'll do because I want creators to keep creating, right? It's like some people collect art. I like paying for content, right? So that's the sort of world I live in. And it's like that with books. I mean, it's very easy for me to hop on and grab a book on a torrent. Anybody can do that. I like paying for books. I like paying creators for their art and their work. And anytime I get free, I mean, this is like, man, I wrote about this in 6 Pixels. It was like, you know, how do we complain in a world where Seth Godin will blog every single day for free and then do quick, now he's on Facebook doing lives and all this stuff. And then his book comes out and people are like, oh, I gotta, like, I'm the first in line. I'll buy 5 copies. They'll sit here. I'll give them to someone. I don't know. Like, how do you not support someone who's constantly also giving a ton of free content, whether it's, you or Dan Pink or an Ann Handley or whoever it might be who creates great content. So I think the world's changed a little bit. And a lot of that has to do with sort of everything post Napster. Like I mean, I'm sure people still steal music, but I'm like, do they in a world where they have a Spotify account or an app? I don't know. Like, I don't even know.
But there also has to be a plan. And I think, it's one of the things going back to this situation we're in, this almost sense of despair in terms of when's it going to end, reading about La Liga suspending, not having crowds coming to the game until 2021. We think, but it's April 23rd. I don't think I can do another 8 months or 7 months of this. And it's the absence of a plan. And I was thinking to myself, to just hear whether the world leaders standing, they could Zoom together, have a little virtual G7 together, just say, we all have a plan. This is the vision. This is the mission. This is the plan. This is what the future looks like. Here are the facts. Here's the data. Now that juxtaposed to what we were talking about, not to like kind of go too far back, but the idea of like, I'm even looking now at CoronaTV thinking, at what point someone said, what's the monetization plan? And I said, well, I don't really have one right now, but that doesn't mean I don't have one in mind. It's just not the right time to start going to Patreon and asking for people to put money in a tip jar or to buy a book. But it's the plan. Whether it's CoronaTV or whether it's the flipping coronavirus, you need a plan. And this is why I've always, if there's been one common theme with me, and you know this, it's strategy before everything, everything.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I've noticed is I'm a big fan of CBC. I live in Canada. It's Canadian Broadcasting Company. And I mean, it could be, it's Crown Corporation. So it is sort of funded government public service. At 9 o'clock, they have a show called The National, very famous sort of news hour. And because I traveled a lot, past tense, I would often just watch Fox and CNN in the hotel room both. And it was like you were watching two different worlds. It was so strange. And the one thing that feels different in Canada when we talk about this is it feels non-political. And I see it when I'm on Facebook talking to certain people or when I'm watching the news. And I'm not saying that that's isolated and it's one country and another country's perspective, but I really do feel like it is non-political, and those conversations are happening about coming together. It feels like in Canada, the parties are very united. And to sort of answer your question, how I see it in terms of all my media consumption and people I speak to and my speaking bureaus, and the fact that they speak to the biggest people in government and healthcare, because that's who they represent, is that they can't do what you're asking because they don't know. Until there's a vaccine, they don't know. And it's a weird moment in time to be looking to leaders for an answer when there's no answer. And the only answer is wash your hands and keep your distance and stay at home. That's not an answer anybody wants to hear. Some people are more vocal and angry about that answer. It's human nature to want to blame someone else for that situation. Cultures, countries, people, leaders. But this was going to happen. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. And this is, I mean, I'm literally just coming off of a fireside chat with Henry Mintzberg that I did, who's, if you don't know who he is, Google him. He's a genius. And just read his Declaration of Interdependence. Read his book, Rebalancing Society, or read all of his 20 books. He's a genius. We are interdependent. And we're sitting in a weird moment in time where it's become very nationalistic, very pluralist. And even in Canada to a certain degree, because we've had to in order to get things like ventilators and PPEs and things like that. But I don't think that's who we are. It's not who we are. And I think that going back to the original point is, you and I are friends, Joseph, because we believed in something greater back in the day of people using this stuff to connect and build community and build more powerful connections for people and brands. And we were very, very right. That we got very, very correct. And we were early in that, and we were right, and we will always be right. And history will be in our favor on that. I want people to reconnect to that more, to when you're to understand it's normal to be angry and upset and be grieving and all this sort of stuff, and your jobs and your income. It's normal. But on the other side, we're interdependent, and we need everybody to get through this. It's not, Jennifer Iannello's like, no one is coming. It's just, no one is coming. Like it's on us to watch our neighbors and not snitch on them.
So there are a couple of things. One is I was on the fireside chat, and it was funny because I was watching you and Henry Mintzberg, and I was just like hurling insults at you the whole time, but you couldn't hear me for some reason. I was like,
wasn't listening.
What the hell does he know? He's a hack. No, it was amazing. And the one thing that I loved was talking about metrics and measurement. He had such amazing things to say.
What a rant, yeah.
When he said, about the data, right? He said he would choose if he needed to hire a surgeon for for major surgery, a surgeon with the highest death rate. Because at least that is the person that's going in for the most dangerous.
Doing the hard stuff, doing the hard work, yeah.
And I mean, but the one thing, as you were talking, I was just filled with such emotion because I was thinking, as arrogant as we are, not you and I, but we the people, we the populace, we this creative class and the business community and the world, the leaders, as arrogant and hubristic as we are in terms of thinking we had it all figured out and we knew the meaning of life and the purpose of everything and why we exist. We didn't know jack shit. And that is the truth. And here we are. And you know what? The thing that makes me the most scared, I was going to say the scaredest, the thing that makes me the most scared is that we won't learn our lesson, and we will go back to the way things were. The rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and we won't be able to, like the great minds like the Mintzbergs, of our and past generations, that we won't be able to say, we cannot make the same mistake again because we won't be allowed to.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on that. One is I spoke about this with Henry, which is people are like, I just want things to go back to normal. And the smart people are saying, you don't understand that normal was broken. So there's a sort of very big thought in there. But my personal journey with this has been really relevant to what you're saying. I built an agency that I sold to WPP that became this larger agency called Miram that I did my earnout and stayed on and helped build into this global thing that's now part of Wunderman Thompson. And so it was an amazing, great, almost 15 plus year journey that I loved. And when I left with everything, thankfully, and amazingly, 6 pixels of separation, my blog, my podcast, 7,000 pieces of content, the ability to still speak and have retain my publishing contracts and all this sort of stuff. And I was really happy. And it's been about 2 years where I took this office space and I've been speaking a lot and creating my content and investing and meeting entrepreneurs and being shown new ideas and being offered very interesting roles and stuff. I don't want roles, but interesting stuff. And sort of looking at what I've built and my community work and all this sort of stuff and thinking, so good to be this diversified and have this many streams of income, like all this stuff we talk about. And then this happens and there's nothing. I literally have there's nothing. All my speaking is gone. My investments are basically, they're not even doing capital calls because they want to ready the ship and get things right before they start doing other investments and make sure. And it's I'll be fine. Don't panic. But it's been very humbling to realize that as great as you think you're doing, that it's nothing. And to push it further, speaking, what's it going to take for me and Joe to get back on stage? It's very simple. The lights have to come back on in the economy. All business has to be back. Businesses have to then decide that they're comfortable sending people on a plane somewhere, that they're comfortable having those people stay in a hotel, that they're comfortable congregating those people in a convention center or in a hotel ballroom, and that it's worth it for all that, and that they've got the insurance and that it's safe to do that. It doesn't take much to realize that me getting back to professional speaking on a stage is probably one of the last businesses that's going to really come back online as we move to reopen this economy or whatever that looks like. And even being in the last business that'll do this, me being a professional speaker, which again, my salary, stand up on stage, sign books, lots of Instagram moments, lovely. In that business, the speaker is at the complete bottom of the food chain. You're at the bottom. You are entry level. These people who are booking you are dealing with massive organizations, massive conference centers, insurances, big, speaking bureaus with multiple speakers. So for me, it's been really humbling to see how nothing you are. I mean, just absolutely nothing. I mean, that's what it is. And so I'm not saying this because I'm depressed or negative. I just never thought that. When I ran my agency, I wasn't that. When I was doing my other stuff, I wasn't that.
Yeah, but
you are that,
But what's so interesting is, at the beginning of this, when you and I were connecting, and you were trying to figure things, out, and you actually, thank God you're well, and I'm,
yeah.
but you'd actually, you hadn't been well. I mean, you'd been.
Yeah, I could have had COVID-19. I don't know. I had a really bad flu in end of February that I think if I had it today, they would think I'm positive for sure.
And it's possible
it's possible I had it. Yeah.
You should will know when you have your antibody
I will know. Yeah.
test. But now, as you're talking about this, I'm noticing something amazing. There's a smile on your face, and there's a smile that basically says, well, "What am I going to do?" And by the way, I am. I complained about. I know I say this a lot to people, so I'm sorry if you've heard this on the show before. I complained about the shoes I wore until I met a man without feet.
Right.
So, you think you're rich, someone's rich. You think you're poor, someone's poorer. But there's something about that, Mitch. And then there's also this thing about the fact that we're all, and I can say this because I'm not a brand, we are all in this together, And what I've been telling people, because people ask for advice, I mean, Bob, and by the way, to everyone out there, I'm sorry if I didn't get to your comments. Normally, I'm much better at putting them on screen. Bob's asking, how do you pivot? Well, this is what I wanted to talk about, sure. which is, on one hand, what you realize, and this is what I've been saying, if you were ahead, Mitch, you were ahead of most people out there, well, you'll be ahead again. It's not like everybody reeled you in. It's not like you're back to ground, to like chutes and ladders, right? Snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
Again. And if you were behind, you just got an opportunity to start the next leg of the race at the same point. So you better, shame on you if you don't prepare yourself now for that second leg. That's how I look at it. And
I don't know that I look at it that way. Here's been my thinking, and it answers Bob's question about how do you pivot. The natural pivot for the speaking is this, I'll get cool gear and in-ear monitors, and I'll be ready and have a good setup and great lighting and in a cool environment, and I can do this. And that's one way to do it, but it's a different business model. When you start really thinking about what a virtual environment experience is, it's a very different business model than a speaking bureau asks me to speak, and I go and fly and speak for a day and come back. And what I realized as I was accumulating this gear and getting all this ready, because I had it and I could do it, is I don't want to do. Not only do I not want to do this, so one answer is, how do you pivot? One is you sit it out. You just don't. You go like, okay, when it comes back, it comes back. If it doesn't, I had a good run. You have to be mature enough to say that. You can say I pivot to make it virtual, and say I'm not really comfortable. I don't know if I like doing it. I'm not sure it's my thing. I'll do it. I'm not sure it's my thing. But I think at a more philosophical level, which speaks directly to what you're saying, Joe, about the strategy, is when I looked at what that pivot looks like, my answer was, I don't like that business model. I don't like selling that time for money business. I like my agency business better. I like having lots of people, lots of clients. And in theory, you are making money overnight, and you're being paid for thought and creativity and strategy and technological developments. And so in my brain, my reaction to what Bob is saying was more back to, if you had the choice to build a virtual online speaking business or starting an agency over again, which would you do? And the answer was agency. Don't think it's a good time to start an agency, so don't start an agency. But in terms of what I would want to do, that would make more sense for me. So then the question became, So then what type of businesses excite you now? Because in a world where you can do anything, why pivot to just the virtual version of what you do? Why? If I'm going to spend time on a plan, a model, investing, why that? Just because it's here? That's not the reason. So you're right. You're 100% right. I just wanted to quantify it more in terms of how I think we need to be thinking. Right now, many people are making decisions based off of the fact that they're panicking and that it's here. And I don't think that either of those are permanent. And I can tell you historically from my own personal experience and struggles that making decisions when you're panicking are never good. Never good. So if you're not panicking, great. And if you can think clearly, great. But in general, I would say take a deep breath, strategize, plan, think it through, but maybe wait for a few lights to come back on. I mean, I can't even get into the library, right? Like, just think about that. I can't go down to the library. So you're going to,
but I have to tell you, like, look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm starting to use the phrase, the big pause, a lot more, because it's allowing me, even when I say that, to almost like, I guess, would that be a onomatopoeia? Like I'm pausing when I even say the words, because this is the opportunity. This is the gift, if there is a gift. It's the gift to allow us to prioritize and introspect and take control of our lives. And I will tell you something. I don't believe that, I'm with you. I don't believe that the future is virtual. I'm a little bit more bullish because I've been lucky enough to teach as I am my second year at West Virginia.
But teaching and online training, see, this is the thing. Teaching online training webinars is 20 years of a sophisticated and mature marketplace. You have professional speakers who are like, I could do this virtually, as if they invented something. Like what people don't get about this business is the minute you say to an event planner, I could do this virtually, they pass that on to the learning and development department, the HR department, or some other department. It's not the event. The event people are events.
I don't want to do it virtually. I
got it.
Yeah. I want those warm nuts on American Airlines. I want it. So we have one thing I have learned about this process is when you go over 1 hour, even though this is a 30-minute show, so that throws us back to the old days, right, Mitch? Which is, it's my show, it's our show, we can make it what we want. That's still the beauty of our social media roots. But at the same time, there are technical issues about being able to get things on certain platforms and blah, blah, blah. Here's what we're going to do.
Let's go to the Zoom.
Mitch is going to join us at the Zoom. If you guys need to know it, it's on your screen at the moment. There it is. That's the Zoom room.
Hey, pop it into the chat or the live comments so that I can copy and paste it, because otherwise I can't. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's in that email. But Mitch, I want to give you just the last 60 seconds or 55 seconds, 54 seconds. Give a little bit of a plug. How can people find you? And I just want to thank you so much for spending time with me and for us to catch up.
Yeah, it's great. And thank you. The stuff is below. It's right there. Just feel free to hit me up there. I've got nothing to promote other than Joseph and the great work he does and the thinking he does. I actually was just rereading his last book and thinking, boy, like, talk about timing on this. I don't know that I would be here if it wasn't for that first book that he wrote that actually led to us being introduced, because I read it and wrote him a letter. So just thanks for what you're doing, and I'm happy to promote you, not me, today.
Well, you know what? The love comes right back at you. Mitch, thank you, my brother from another mother. We'll see some of you over at the Zoom, and take care and be safe, everybody. Bye-bye.